In the wake of the Supreme Court's refusal to stay an incredibly restrictive abortion law in the state of Texas, there's been a tremendous amount of analysis regarding what could happen if legal and safe abortion was eliminated in the United States. Richard Wolff is an economics professor who says that in addition to the other huge ramifications, eliminating legal and safe abortions in the United States could lead to an economic crisis. Professor Wolff was a guest on the Thursday edition of the Thom Hartmann radio program.
If you abandon abortion, if you deny women and parents in general the right to make a decision about having a child, bringing a child into the world, and all the rest, you're going to create, because we know this from history, an enormous number, nobody knows the exact amount, but an enormous number of children whose parents either did not understand what they were getting into or do not want to be responsible for their children, cannot carry the burden, will not admit that to the friends, neighbors, or even their own family members. In short, you're going to produce an enormous number of badly raised children who are not able to develop many of the qualities you need to be a productive member of society. To say the same thing in plain English, you're going to create an army of new generations of people in this country who are going to need enormous amounts of corrective help later in life to compensate for what you are condemning them to by insisting that they be born to people who would otherwise have chosen not to be in the position of parents. And especially in the United States, where we have this exaggerated concern for the baby being born, and then coupled with an extraordinary hesitancy, usually exaggerated in the very people who oppose abortion, in giving the help to their parents for the 18 years between the birth and the person's becoming an adult, in terms of school support and financial support and all the other things normal children need, but these children will need an extra. And the bottom line, therefore, is we're going to have either very disturbed children in huge numbers through no fault of their own, or we're going to have enormous extra costs for social programs at all levels to compensate for this. And the people who are fighting this abortion seem not to want this abortion issue, seem in many cases not to want to face this, not to want to recognize this, not even to want to ask the question, what are the economic implications? I'm not saying that the economic implications are the only relevant ones. Lots of other issues are raised in this abortion struggle. But there is a kind of unwillingness to deal with the enormous economic costs that are going to come down on this country if, in fact, it takes these steps that are like what the state of Texas did.
I think it was the Freakonomics guys back a little more than a decade ago who claimed that the steady drop in crime that we saw in the United States from the mid-1980s through the early 2000s, and there was a steady decrease in crime, particularly in violent crime, that steady is the result of Roe v. Wade and in 1973, meaning that during that period from 1973 to the 1990s, as these unwanted children would have been maturing and many of them becoming criminals, they were not there because their parents had chosen to have an abortion. And that Roe v. Wade actually was responsible for the decrease in the crime rate in the United States. Is that what you're referencing? Has that study been substantiated? I've never seen a good follow-up on it. I've never really looked at that carefully.
Well, I mean, many studies corroborate that. But I don't want to make it only a question of crime. But just to finish the point on crime, the decline in violent crimes is as impressive since 2000 as it was in the prior period that you just cited. It's really only in the pandemic in the last year and a half, 2 years, that we've had a bit of an uptick, but we are way below, on the order of half the rate of violent crime in this country now that we had in the year 2000. So there's no question that there's a relationship between not having unwanted children imposed on families that cannot or do not want to cope with them. And I won't go into the problems of our foster care system, the problems of our adoption systems, which produce an awful lot of troubled people. But it isn't just crime. It's going to be the need for enormous amounts of mental health correction, compensations on a physical level with all kinds of physical diseases. Children who are not wanted, compensating, for example, by eating a great deal. It's the cheapest drug there is, junk food. And we have one of the worst obesity problems, particularly among children, in the whole world. No one can draw a one-to-one line between these things, but it's crystal clear in the medical profession, in the mental health profession, that if you create enormous stresses on people, whether it's because of unemployment, or whether it's because of job insecurity, or whether it's because they have more children than they can manage, than they want, that they can bestow love upon, you're going to be paying enormous costs for that into an indefinite future.
Economics professor Richard Wolff was a guest on the Thom Hartmann radio program. For KFUG Community News, I'm Mike Thornton.